Hello and welcome to the Money Marketing Podcast. I'm Kimberly Dondo, Digital Content Manager. And in this week's Weekend Essay Podcast, we have news editor Michael Klimes explaining why we must end Londongrad. Take it away, Michael.
Sometimes you forget about a conversation for it to materialize years later in a different context. This memory came up in the light of Russia's invasion of Ukraine launched by Vladimir Putin on Thursday, 24th of February. I now recollect making a critical comment about the City of London at the launch party of a now defunct radio station. I said that it is understandable for the general public to be sceptical of the wealth accumulated there, given the legacy of the 2008 financial crisis. This person did not like my remark, and I thought that was revealing and wondered if it struck a nerve. It seems that same nerve has been stimulated by Russia's attack on Ukraine, as all the questions about dubious fortunes have sharpened. Britain's famously liberal and open economy, epitomised in London, suddenly looks morally lacking. Issues raised by being a destination for extravagant sums of foreign money, how was it made, and who does it really belong to, are two common ones. These questions are not new and have been raised in certain quarters by people concerned about human rights and corruption for years. But money talks and can warp perceptions and even changes people. Sadly, these worries were brushed aside in the 2000s as the money to be made outweighed any sense of principle. Many believe the twin perils of inflation combined with boom and bust economics was in the past. In that heady climate, the UK, and London in particular, really rolled out the red carpet for foreign money. Much of that money was Russian and came from its integration into the world economy after the collapse of the Soviet Union. The introduction of Roman Abramovich to British life through his acquisition of Chelsea Football Club in 2003 was a totemic moment in retrospect. It was symbolic of how Russian money would become a powerful influence in core areas of British life. These were politics, football, finances, media, and law. The penetration was so successful, some have even talked about Londongrad. Why has London been so attractive to Russia's super wealthy? The answer is a whole suite of services that can put a legitimate face on exceptional fortunes. Think of private schools for children, skillful lawyers that use the UK's generous libel laws, and erudite estate agents that can help you find prime real estate. Chelsea, Mayfair and Knightsbridge are famous locations for those with an intriguing fortune. There is also the opacity of the Companies House registry, where a firm can be set up with little fuss. It can be extremely difficult to figure out who owns what company or even understand what a firm's genuine practices are. Journalists who have used Companies House over the years know what I'm talking about. Yet all the factors that made London such an international haven for plutocratic wealth have been under pressure. The invasion of Ukraine has just brought the themes to the surface in a violent manner. What do I mean by this? There have been 4 shocks that have struck the UK in the past 12 years that the country has been acutely vulnerable to. Each of them has exposed a gap between the part of the population that has done well from globalisation and those who have not. What might be termed as the London way, or the belief that the free movement of goods, capital, labour and services is always good, has been exposed as insufficient. In fact, that the belief that there is never a downside to these tendencies evolved into a certain type of dogma, almost a religious one at times, in parts of the middle and upper classes. Let us take 4 crises in turn and see how they relate to oligarchic wealth and the invasion of Ukraine. The 2008 financial crisis exposed how the UK's economy is over-reliant on finance. It also punctured the myth politicians and central bankers had solved inflation and market downturns. There was a certain amount of hubris that the misfortunes of the past could never happen again. This complacency arose from the steady economic growth in the run-up to 2008. Why should the good times stop if they have been good for such a long time? The danger with such a view is that it fosters ideological and moral blindness to such an extent you become corrupt. It was assumed the mantra of flexible markets and borders lifted all boats in the run-up to the crash, when it was not so. The belief it did is inseparable from the point of turning a blind eye to plutocratic wealth being stuffed into London. If everyone is better off from the status quo, then who cares about wealth from questionable sources funneled into the UK? It seems the trade-off was legitimate until it was not. The same goes for the decision to leave the European Union that many Remainers, I admit including me, took personally. How was it so many fellow countrymen had a very different view of fundamental issues, from open markets to the free movement of people? Even more importantly, why did so many Remainers react in shock to the vote? The answer is arrogance and a lack of imagination. We simply could not believe the direction of history could move in a sharply different direction from what we like. It also went against the grain of what many had come to believe was and should be the state of the world. The free movement of goods, labour, services and capital is always a good thing. There was a similar reaction among Americans in the established political and media circles to the election of Donald Trump. How was it a New Yorker real estate billionaire could destroy two of the most powerful political dynasties, the Clintons and the Bushes, in one electoral cycle? It was a formidable spectacle to behold on his way to the White House. There were also questions about what role Russian intelligence played in Trump's ascent. I personally believe, although they played a role, the explanation for Trump's win were rooted in US domestic politics. The fourth shock is COVID-19 that inverted the world more than anything else. Suddenly, borders, security and restriction of movement became hallmarks of good policy rather than the opposite. There was also government intervention in our lives, not seen since the 1940s. Clearly, the world has not been behaving to certain paradigms anymore, and the latest accumulation of these shocks is Ukraine. Many find it disturbing and unsettling as the good times, or rather the comfortable times, have ended. I see a massive colonial and imperialistic war being waged in the heart of Europe. Many are stunned by it, and we have all had to readjust to keep up. While Vladimir Putin is responsible for this war alone, we have to ask hard questions of ourselves. How is it our political and economic system became so easily corrupted by dirty Russian money? Why do people become complacent and not realise history can go in an unwelcome direction? And to go back to the beginning of this essay, why did that person squirm when I mildly criticised the City of London? And why do I remember it now? It is because Putin's invasion of Ukraine has forced us to reckon with certain hard truths about ourselves. One of them is that London's financial and legal architecture has been used in ways it should not have. That has to change.
Thanks, Mike, for another insightful Weekend Essay podcast. We do hope that you enjoyed it. Please do keep up to date with all our new releases via Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else you get your podcast from. You can also keep up to date with all our new online content on the Money Marketing website and all of our in-print content via the Money Marketing Mag, so be sure to subscribe. You can also follow us on our Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. See you next time.